So I've kind of given you a lot of stuff that hopefully is making you think about things in the back of your mind, and I want to get down to more of the specific things. But the big takeaway here is, again, this is why Buddhism is different than other religions. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, you are assuming there is a God who's always permanent, always been there, always will be there, and that is the fundamental starting point at which you then, all the other aspects of the religion unfold. That is very different than Buddhism. So this is one of the reasons why, if you say you're a Buddhist, that this is really what sort of, where the rubber meets the road. This is really where Buddhism is different. If you say you're a Buddhist, this is what you have to, this is the belief system, this is the science system, whatever you want to say, that you need to buy into, okay? That's not to say that you can't be a Christian or whatever, or a Hindu and believe in permanent gods and say, yeah, but I like the idea that Buddhism makes people kinder to one another and makes them more compassionate, so I'm just going to try to be more compassionate and follow sort of Buddhism lifestyle, right? That's fine, and Buddhists don't have any problem with that, by the way. You don't have to buy into all this stuff I just told you about cause and effect and all these kind of things. It's fine. And so again, this is the difference between being a Buddhist and following a Buddhist lifestyle. In other words, you can be a Christian and you can practice yoga and you can do Buddhist mindfulness meditation. Buddhists don't have a problem with that. That's fine. And Buddhism does not have a problem with Christianity or any of these other religions. It's fine. Because fundamentally, if you look at what Christians say, basically do unto others as you have them do unto you, the golden rule, be compassionate toward people. And even Buddhist leaders like the Dalai Lama have said that Buddhists could learn from Christians. And he was watching these Christians do a soup kitchen, feeding people. And he goes, Buddhists could learn from that. Look, these guys are actually directly manifesting compassion and doing good things for other people. As Buddhists, we could do that too. So again, it's not that one religion is better than one another. And it's not that the final sort of outcome is really that different. But it is the fundamental place where it comes from is different. Okay, so if you're going to call yourself a Buddhist, if you identify as a Buddhist, you should understand where Buddhism comes from. Next question?
I just wanted to ask, when I went to Thailand, I thought it was great when I met with the monk. He emphasized saying that it's perfectly okay for us to consider ourselves like a Christian and have the philosophy of a Buddhist.
Yeah, except for the philosophy of impermanence. Because if you're a Christian, that goes against Christianity. Yeah. If you're a Christian, my understanding of Christianity is you're not to think of your God as an impermanent being subject to karma, but it's something that's always permanent and all-powerful and omnipotent. And that principle would be antithetical to Christianity. But you could believe in that all-powerful God, and you could live a Buddhist lifestyle and do good things for other people. For a Buddhist perspective, that's perfectly fine. They don't care, right? And in Buddhism, you're not allowed to proselytize. You can't go out and say, yeah, don't be a Christian, that sucks, be a Buddhist. No, that's if you see a Buddhist doing that, then they are breaking a pretty big rule. Okay? You're not allowed to proselytize. You can tell them, hey, you might try mindfulness meditation, it might help you feel better. That's perfectly fine, right? But this is a big difference between so I want you to know what a real Buddhist is versus a Buddhist lifestyle. Okay? And again, rubber meets the road, in your daily life and human behavior, it probably doesn't make that big of a difference. You can all paths are good. Being Christian is good, being Muslim is good. They're all good paths. At the fundamental level, what they advocate is, basically most religions advocate that people try to treat each other more nicely. And, Buddhism is pretty much the same in that regard. Okay. So, Buddhism, again, this idea that there's this fundamental misperception of reality. The Buddhists conceptualized this as something they called 12 dependent links, 12 links of dependent arising. Okay, so they actually conceptualized this. And I'm going to show you the visual symbol for this stuff. And this is something that again, is another fundamental thing in Buddhism that comes out of this cause and effect. So how do we, in this world of cause and effect, develop this misperception of reality? And in a way, you can think this a little bit like developmental psychology. And again, this is something like a developmental psychology that would expand beyond an individual lifetime. Okay? So there's sort of stages of development. There's stages of how we develop our perception of reality. Traditionally, this has been described as 12 stages, and I'll talk to you about this. And again, there is, and we're going to talk about the wheel of life, the Buddhist wheel of life. And again, this is a symbol. I'm going to show you the whole thing in a bit, but this is a symbol. Around the edge of the wheel are these 12 links. Okay, these 12 links. And these are very difficult to describe because they're kind of a psychophysical, developmental stage sort of thing that also has to do with, again, from life to life to life. And this book, it's a very good book. I like this. I recommend, if you're interested in Buddhism, I highly recommend this. It's by an author named John Snelling, Snelling. And it's called The Buddhist Handbook, A Complete Guide to Buddhist Schools, Teaching, Practice, and History. So I highly recommend this book. I really like this. It's pretty easy to read. It doesn't get too esoteric, and yet it's able to present a lot of these ideas. And one it does a really good job of is talking about these 12 interdependent links. So I'll talk to you about these. Okay? So the first link is a blind man, and this represents the ignorance and the inability to see the truth. This represents that we develop this fundamental misperception of things. Okay? The second is a potter, and this represents action. He's doing something. He has raw materials of clay and water, and he's creating a new pot on this, on the potter's wheel. And this is that, you take the fundamental raw materials and you're going to create something new, a new perception. Third link is a monkey, and this represents conditioned consciousness. The monkey is skittish, wayward, virtually impossible to control. It blindly grasps one branch after another as it swings through the trees. So it is a consciousness restless with karmic urges. In other words, this is a consciousness that's pushed around blindly by karma. About that. The fourth link is craving. This is illustrated by a seated man being offered drink by a woman who stands before him. The woman is offering the drink to man may be intended to bring him to mind the intensity of sexual desire, that he is going to crave things. The man partaking in alcohol emphasizes the addictive nature of pleasure. The attachment that evolved from ignorance helps condition the karmic seeds sown in our stream of consciousness. Okay, so in other words, our consciousness is restless, being pushed around by karma, it starts to crave things. They crave things that feel good. And so then becomes sort of attached to those things. The fifth link is grasping. And this is, which one is this? This is, so this is the sort of fruition of the craving from the past. And the past link was, the fourth one was sort of, experiencing these pleasures and then sort of becoming, wanting to have more of the pleasure. And this comes to fruition in grasping. And this craving leads action to fulfill desire. In other words, you have to do something to fulfill your craving. Okay? And so this is represented by a woman who climbs a tree to pluck a fruit, representing the craving having taken the form of a concrete action. You got to do something to get that thing that you want. Okay? And the fruit, of course, is an ancient symbol for earthly desires, like the Garden of Eden, the example of this. And the woman going up the length of climbing the tree to grasp what she perceives the fulfillment of her desires, a metaphor for the almost disproportionate efforts we expend to pursue similar temptations. Okay? So we have things that we want, we'll go all sorts of out our ways to fulfill these things that we crave. Becoming. Lost to all but their own urgent desire, a couple melts together in the act of love. Tumbling rapturously to their release, they do not know that a new life has started in the woman's womb. Thus, an image for bringing into existence is a man and woman performing the sexual act, initiating a new life. And so this one, It signifies the contact of the sense organs and the sense data that creates a sense impression. So in other words, the thing that we're getting, that we're giving birth to, and these are mental processes, if you will. What this represents metaphorically is that what this is giving birth to something that is a result of this craving and this grasping, is a sort of sense impression of something, right? That it becomes sort of, it takes on a life of its own. That's the metaphor for the baby. That this grasping, you know, the idea of wanting something and then reaching for something, getting the thing, all kind of coalesces together and sort of takes on a life of its own, right? So if I give you the image of, say, a pint of, you know, Ben & Jerry's ice cream, right? That, you think of that pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, it contains with it that craving and that grasping of that object, right? And you can remember the taste of it, you can remember all those things, and it becomes its own thing. It has its own sort of birth into our mental reality, if that makes sense. Rebirth. After the process of procreation is the actual giving the birth. It's often represented by an explicit image of a woman delivering a child. The new life is the conditioned independence upon which arises death and decay. So again, the woman giving birth, this new life's alive, but in the course of time, it expertly leads to the next one, which is going to be an old man, the weight of all the ills of the world. In other words, we give birth to these sense craving sensations, and then we accumulate these things in our lifetime. And these are the things that make up our karma, okay? Especially the bad karma, unfortunately, right? That we start doing all these things. We have these patterns in order to get these things that we crave, right? And this leads us to condition our life according to these patterns. We accumulate these patterns, these condition to our life, and then at the end of our lives, we feel the effects of these things. And the eighth link is the name and form. So one thing you can think of is then we die, and we're in the in-between life. And we're going to talk about this in-between our lives area of development. We'll talk about that more. But this one will be name and form. Two men ride in a boat while a third, more imposing the other, steers the boat. And this one is, the boat is a vehicle that carries the men across the stream. Similarly, the body is the vehicle that carries us more or less throughout the world, right? So we live through the world, we go through this body, we accumulate all these karmic things, we go through the world, so we're steering through the world. And you can think of the big guy in the boat as sort of the karma that's steering us through these things, the karma that we've accumulated. Ninth link is the senses. A man sits in a house which has 5 windows and doors. And through these apertures, he watches the windows, and the door denotes the 6 senses: eye, nose, tongue, body, together with the mind. These are the portals that we gain our entrance into the world. Okay? And so this one is, the openings are the sense doors, and again, this has to do with this, we take in sensations. So we have to have a way, you know, and this of course fuels the craving. These kind of things fuels the karma that we're able to take in through our senses, all these things. Because if you didn't feel stuff, you wouldn't feel good or bad, right? And then you wouldn't be, and, you know, the craving probably wouldn't exist. So this is really intermixed with the craving. The cravings are intermixed with our senses. It's our physiological being. The 10th is contact. Man and woman gaze each other passionately, hands entwined, pull towards each other, grasping each other close. They strain to press the 2 bodies into one. Couple embracing depicts the contact of sense organs with their objects. So through these sense organs, we actually perceive our, you know, world, our reality, and then we're able to make contact with them. And then through that contact, we're able to experience things as being pleasurable, unpleasurable, and this again leads to all these cravings and graspings and things like that. The 11th link is feeling. Howl of pain shatters the silence as a man falls to his knees, groaning, his hands pressed to his face. The center of his right eye, deeply embedded in it, is an arrow. The arrow represents the sense data impinging upon the sense organs. In this case, the eye, in a very vivid way. The image suggests the strong feelings of which our sensory experience invokes. So our sensory experience invokes very strong feelings. The things in the world that we sense, that we feel, have a very strong effect on us. Again, both positive and negative. Very strong effect on us. And again, pleasant feelings arise from contact with pleasant objects, unpleasant feelings from unpleasant objects, and so on. And finally, the 12th link is old age and death. Okay, and this is portrayed by a coffin being carried toward its ultimate rest. Coffin, by the way, is these things that people carry on their back, up in Tibet and places like this. Whatever is born is bound to experience, old age, sickness, and death. We learn that from the life of the Buddha. The waning of physical powers in old age, the pain of separation and loss, the final death. And once birth has taken place, the process has been set in motion and must end in death. Okay? So one way you can think of this is that we, again, have all these things in life, this grasping, this thing, sense organs, all this stuff goes on, and again, we're accumulating karma, but we're also, through being involved in all these things, we're accumulating a lot of suffering. We're caught in this cyclic existence, experiencing all these 12 links throughout our lives, and even in between our lives. And then again, we're back to the first. And I'll show you this. I'll show you the whole picture of these things later on. Now, you don't need to know the details of the 12 links, okay? Because I know this is complicated. It's complicated for me, but it is kind of in a way. If you guys taken, how many people here have had learning and perception? Of course. Well, this is kind of the Buddhist version of that, if you want to think about that way, or developmental stages. Okay. So again, this is sort of for the Buddhists how that dependent causation really manifests in a human psychophysiological existence. But you don't need to know the details of this. I just want to expose you to that. Now we're going to get on to other things, but we're going to get to the stuff that the Buddha first taught. Okay, so this is the Buddha's first sermon to his former colleagues, and he gives them a sermon, and in this he comes up with a couple things. The first are the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths. Okay. So again, this is the fundamental summary of the realization of all this cause and effect. Summarize these things. Mm-hmm. So the first one, life means suffering, that there's suffering in life. To live as a human being means that we are going to suffer. Human nature is not perfect, neither is the world we live in. During our lifetime, we inevitably have to observe physical suffering, pain, sickness, injury, tiredness, old age, and eventually death. And we have to endure psychological suffering, sadness, fear, frustration, disappointment, and depression. There are different degrees of suffering, and there are also positive experiences of life that we perceive as the opposite of suffering. And yet, these positive experiences are also a problem because you have these positive experiences, but then they go away, and then you suffer because they've gone away, right? A pint of Ben & Jerry's. It's really good. While I'm eating it, I feel like I'm not suffering, right? But then that pint is gone, and you ever remember the spoon you're scraping around the bottom? Now you feel suffering, right? And then a minute later, you realize you've just eaten a whole pint of ice cream by yourself, and now you're really suffering, right? Oh my God, I'm going to get fat, my stomach hurts, right? So even the positive experiences have suffering attached to them. Life is totally imperfect and incomplete because it is impermanent. Our world is, again, from this fundamental realization, everything is impermanent. And because things are impermanent, they're constantly changing. But we want to hold on and make things permanent. We want to believe things are permanent. And so this disconnect is the thing that causes us to suffer all the time. Because the actual reality of impermanence is constantly impinging upon us. Think about human life. There's people you love in your life, your parents that you love, your children, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, people you love. But sometimes those people go away because they're impermanent. And eventually they're all going to go away. And that's a shock, and we suffer. People in Las Vegas, 58 people, 59 people are getting shot, dead. All those people, they suddenly have gone away. It creates suffering. People realize, oh my gosh, things are impermanent, right? So impermanence creates this suffering. So life is suffering. We live in a world full of suffering. And again, if you don't believe it, just look in the paper, talk to somebody, you'll see people have all sorts of kinds of suffering. Yes?
So lifetime warranties are pretty much a scam.
Lifetime warranties are conditional, right? Yeah, but no, they're smart. The only condition they know you're going to die, so it's just your life. It's not a permanent warranty, right? It's just for you. You bought the TV set, you get a lifetime thing. But when you die, that's it. TV breaks down, your relatives and your kids, they don't get a new TV. You know, that's only for you. So people, you know, they realize this. I'm going to give you a permanent lifetime thing forever. No, because everything's impermanent, right? You know? So yes, yeah, no permanent warranties, only lifetime warranties, right? Permanent for you, maybe it feels permanent for you, but you know, okay? But we know that that's not the case, right? So again, this is the life is suffering, right? This is the first of the noble truths, the first thing the Buddha realizes. The second thing is that the origin of the suffering is due to attachment. So we've been talking about this, okay? So again, when we go through this 12 dependent links, we see that, you know, craving and grasping, these are the mechanisms of attachment. We break them down into real molar detail. You can see the mechanism, but this is taken all told, you know, this is attachment. We're attached to things. We crave things, okay? Not just physical objects, but ideas and anything in our perception. Our ideas, our, you know, feelings, our, you know, physical objects, any of these things, okay? Because we have a desire, we have a passionate desire for these things, and we want them because these things make us feel good, and we want those feeling good feelings, things of feeling good, to be permanent. We want them to last forever. I want an endless pint of Ben and Jerry's that I'm constantly eating all the time, and just constantly putting that delicious ice cream in my mouth and tasting it and just feeling bliss at that. I want that to be permanent, right? But how many people have ate a pint of ice cream? You know it is not permanent. It goes away, right? All of the things in our life are like that, you know? I think I can safely say most of us, you know, sexual feelings are very pleasurable for most of us, right? But you can't sit around and be having sex constantly. You know, you have an orgasm that only lasts a few seconds, right? It doesn't keep on lasting and lasting and lasting and lasting and lasting. There are people who have persistent arousal syndrome. I'll talk about that in my bizarre behavior class next time. But it's not pleasant for those people. It's very annoying. I will talk about that, so remind me in that class. Shameless plug, next semester, Friday mornings, I'll be talking about that at some point. But for a lot of people, it's not pleasant. And the pleasure just lasts a little while, right? And then it goes away, and then we feel all this suffering. Because we're attached. We want that pleasure to be permanent. We have an attachment to it, okay? You're a heroin addict. You're banging heroin. You get the rush from the heroin, you want that to last forever. But what happens? It goes away, and then you feel disproportionately crappy, right? You have this high, but then it makes you go low, and then you need more heroin, you crave it. And so another way, we're all addicts. Okay, we're all addicts. We can crave things besides heroin, right? Just you know, all these things in our life that we're attached to that make us feel as if we want things to be permanent. We want the pleasure to be permanent. But it's not, and this causes a problem for us, okay? And the problem is that this stuff is all due to our attachment to these things, okay? These are the two big things the Buddha had revelations about. The big thing that we're attached to, the main attachment, our sense of self as being permanent, our ego, if you will, our identity. We use ego with a big E, okay, to represent the totality of our self. Okay? This is the thing we're really attached to, more than anything. Yes?
How do we start the process of letting go of those attachments?
Oh, we're going to get to that. Hold that question. That's a very good one. Hold on to that. We're getting there. We're almost there. I promise before you go today, we'll start on it. Because I know you all want to get out of here after this lecture and start working toward enlightenment. Right? Yeah, we're going to get to there. That's a good, very good question. We're going to get there. But first we have to understand all these things. And the big attachment is to ourself. Because we want ourself to be permanent. We don't want it to go away. We're really attached to it. Being us is, the only way you get pleasure is through being you. And you want that pleasure to be permanent. You don't want to die because that's unpleasurable. So we're attached to it. That's the thing we really crave. And so we build our reality around this illusion that we are permanent. We treat everything as if everything is permanent. Okay? And this creates problems. But what the Buddha figures out is that there is a way to get rid of the suffering. Cessation of suffering is attainable. Okay? And this is traditionally called Nirodha. Nirodha means the unmaking of sensual craving and conceptual attachment. In other words, unraveling this misperception of reality. Okay? First, you have to understand how reality is constructed. And it's constructed through this cause and effect thing that I talked to you about at length. Once you understand that, then you can start realizing, the Buddha realizes, that once he understands that, in the middle of the night, he realizes that there is a way to undo this misperception. And this is what he does. There is a path to do this, a way to do this. Okay? This is the big deal, because before, it didn't seem like there was a way to do this. Buddha tried the extremes, hedonism, asceticism, didn't work. The middle way, there's a middle way, he figures this out. There's a way that we can overcome suffering in this world and reach a state of nirvana. Again, you can think of nirvana in many different ways. Freedom from worries, not being as affected by being in this sea of cause and effect. And the last noble truth is that not only is the cessation of suffering attainable, there is a way to do this. There is a method for ending the suffering. There is a plan. Okay? It's the fourth noble truth. There is a plan. There's a way to do it. It begins, initially for the Buddha, conceptualizes this as a gradual path of self-improvement, and he calls this the Eightfold Path. It's the middle way between the extremes of excessive self-indulgent hedonism and excessive self-mortification, asceticism. It leads to the end of the cycle of rebirth. Okay? And there's a way to do this. And it's got some it's very specific. It's a plan, it's essentially a plan that is a lifestyle plan. You guys, anybody here gone on one of those diets? You know, where you have to do all this stuff and change your life and eat certain kinds of foods and everything? Like it's a plan. You do these kind of things very well worked out, and you just follow the steps, right? This is what the Buddha is essentially doing. It's like a diet for perceiving things. It's like a permanency diet, right? You're going to get rid of all those carbs in your diet and become thin and beautiful. You're going to get rid of Buddhism. You're going to get rid of all those feelings of permanency and become enlightened, right? And there's a plan for this. And the plan is called the Eightfold Path. And this Eightfold Path has to do with lifestyle, and it has to do with styles of thinking. So you're going to work on your thinking, you're going to work on the things you do, your actions, and then you're going to do some very specific exercises. Okay? So the first thing on the Eightfold Path is right understanding. And right understanding means that you have had some teaching, first of all, about the Four Noble Truths, but you should also, I think, understand the things behind the Four Noble Truths, which is this idea of cause and effect, which you guys have now got. Okay? You have to understand this. You need to think this out. You need to listen to these teachings, and these teachings need to make sense to you. And you need to say, yeah, that makes sense. This is what I observe out in reality, that things are impermanent, and that everything is cause and effect. You know, I went and watched that PBS special on the Big Bang and, you know, how the universe came into existence. And, yeah, that seems like that's really true. And that, you know, is pretty much similar to what Buddhists are telling me. And so, yeah, I believe this stuff. I'm convinced now that this is a accurate perception of reality, or an accurate depiction of reality. The second one is right thought. And right understanding, right thought, and right speech, these constitute wisdom. And right thought is basically, this is like a little like, I think of this one a little as like kind of cognitive behavioral counseling. Not quite psychotherapy, but counseling. And this is that you know that there's things that make you feel better. And these can be some behavioral things, you know, like not being greedy, you know, hey, you know, really I don't need that third piece of chocolate cake. You know, I really don't need that. You know, my neighbor wants to borrow my lawnmower. I usually don't like to let him because I don't like him, but you know what, I'm just going to let him borrow my lawnmower. Simple things. Okay? Being detached. Yeah, you know, I saw those guys putting up neo-Nazi stuff on campus, and, you know, I got all worked up and pissed off about it, but really, you know, I don't really need to get that upset about it. I just need to do something about it. I don't need to get upset about it. I need to do something about it. I need to take some right action, right? I need to do something about it. Okay? Love and nonviolence. This is typical Hindu things. Also, we find these in Buddhism, ahimsa, non-injury to beings, Found a spider in my house crawling around. Normally I just squish it, but you know, really the Buddha tells me that, you know, we all live in a world of cause and effect, and you know, that spider is related to me, and I don't need to kill it. It's just living its life. I'll just catch it in a jar and take it outside, and it'll live its life. And you know what? It's a nice thing when I do that. I find I have less bugs in the house because the spider eats them all. So yeah, there's a little selfish thing in there too. Helps me, right? So I don't need to kill things. And maybe I don't need to eat steak every night, you know, because it's bad. It's killing cows. So maybe I can just have a hamburger once a week. You know, I don't need it every night. I can do what I can do, right? Or maybe I'm really, you know, maybe I can be vegetarian. I'm a vegan or something, you know. Do what you can do, right? Check yourself. Check your thoughts. The thought is based on selfish desire, hatred or violence. Then, you know, you can correct that. So yeah, I feel violent right now. I'm really pissed at those people. I really want to punch them. We acknowledge the feeling, and then I can acknowledge it and realize I don't need to act on it. Okay? So this is right thought. Try to get your thoughts together. It's not like cognitive behavioral therapy, right? Identify your negative thought processes and then try to replace those with good thoughts. Okay? Third is right speech. Anybody here ever been in a bar when a fight broke out? So what happens? Is it people just sitting in the bar drinking my beer? And then somebody just comes over and walks over like, hey, yeah, bam, right? That's usually not how the fights start. How do the fights start?
Communication.
Right? Usually there are words exchanged before the fight. Right? Usually words exchanged before the fight. In other words, words get us into trouble. It's very easy to mislead people through words into bad karma, bad karmic actions. Okay? In other words, fights usually start with words. Now we can also substitute for words, we can also substitute tweets. Tweets are just words that are written down, but they are still communicated. Language causes problems, right? You can tweet yourself into all sorts of issues. You could tweet yourself into World War III, nuclear annihilation of the entire world, right? Start with language. Yikes. Gotta be careful about that, right? So at our level, be careful about that. You're gonna go to a bar, somebody bumps into you, don't let it escalate. Better you just shut up. As a great psychoanalyst once said, why say anything? Right? Just keep your mouth shut and you will do well, right? If you do have to say something, you say something nice. Oh, I'm really sorry I bumped into you. Can I buy you a beer? Right? We're going to get a lot of trouble with language. So violence is one thing. Language usually is the predecessor to violent behaviors. But you can do all sorts of other things with language. You know, you look like a nice guy. Hey man, I've got this bridge over in Camarillo. I'm only going to let you know about this, but I'm selling the bridge. Today, $500. You could own a bridge in Camarillo. You realize you could go charge toll on that bridge? You know how much money you could make? But I got to get rid of it today because I just need the money. I need the cash for another deal on this. $500. Sell you this bridge, right? Not good. Not right speech, right? I'm manipulating him with language. My dulcet, silver-tongued devil words are coming out, and I'm convincing him to spend money. I'm lying and cheating him. I'm not telling him the truth, right? Selling him a bridge, right? That is not right speech, right? Right? That is not right speech. But we do this all the time. We're marinated in a whirl of this. You know, the advertising business is basically a business where we essentially try to convince people with language, and not just word language, also visual language, that they should desire something or want something or overpay for something or get something they don't need. This, in a Buddhist perspective, is not right speech. Okay? Yes?
How do we expect Martians to act then?
Martians.
Merchants.
Merchants. Well, in our society, this is what it's become. But anybody here work as a salesman? Anybody here been a long-term salesman? What is one of the hallmark aspects of a successful long-term salesperson? If I buy something from you, you sell me, let's say you're selling me a car, and you give me the version of the bridge speech in the car. This is the best car in the world. I'm going to sell it to you for the cheapest price.
You don't know your customer.
I don't know my customer. And what am I gonna do? Eventually I'm gonna realize that you ripped me off, and am I gonna come buy another car from you? No, right? And people have done studies in this. One aspect of a really good salesman is knowing the customer and being honest.
Yeah, ethics.
You know, let them know, this is, hey, I'm selling someone a great product, it's a really good car, I'm not gonna sell you a Hyundai and tell you this is like the best car in the world, it's the fastest car, it's the most safest car, tell you a bunch of lies, because you're gonna find out that those aren't really true, right? And so good salesmen will treat you nicely, they'll know you, and they'll be honest, And if you do your research and you come to them, and they may be they're imperfect human beings like all of us. They may bias what they're telling you a little bit, but from a Buddhist perspective, you should try to be honest. You should be straightforward. And if you're an honest salesman, you're going to get return customers. And I know this. I'm a person who buys a lot of cars, and I've bought a lot of cars from dealerships in this area over the past 15 years. I can tell you the ones I will never go to again. I will absolutely not even step foot 10 feet from their lot. I'll just go by. And there's places here, I think they treated me really well, and they were really honest with me. And those are the people I go back to, right? And this is true. This is also true with anything you buy, right? Go buy a pair of shoes, and somebody sells you a crappy pair of shoes, tells you it's the best. I'm not going to buy stuff from them anymore. You guys had this experience, right? But we also are gullible human beings. We're incredibly gullible. We're incredibly susceptible to persuasion. Again, take my 473 class next semester. I'm going to go in a lot of detail about this. It's the theme of the class, by the way, how incredibly gullible we are. But the point of Buddhism is not to be gullible, and it's not to be swayed by persuasion, but to be able to deal with things honestly and directly. And that we're much happier if we deal with things honestly and directly, and that starts with language. Okay, that starts with language. Very important. So simple things. Right? Stay away from backbiting, slander, rumor mongering, because they bring disharmony to people. Stay away from harsh and malicious language. Okay? Speak carefully and appropriately. Okay? Yes?
What if you just cuss out of this?
But cussing isn't bad.
Okay.
As long as you're not. If I cuss, I start using F-bombs. Because I'm mad, I stubbed my toe or something, does that make you want to go start, oh man, I heard him say the F-bomb, so I think I'm just going to say the F-bomb now too, right? Really? I think if you're a teenager, my kid, if he hears me swearing, like, oh, Dad said bad words, be like, oh, maybe I'll say it, right? And for most of us, it doesn't matter. But if I'm like all pissed off, like, F you, and I'm doing it directly to you, that's a different thing, right? Rather than say, hey, like you did that thing, I really, really kind of made me a little upset. Can we talk about it? 'Cause I know you're a really good person at heart. You're a really nice person, but I think you did something. I'm sure you didn't mean to rip me off and sell me the bridge, right? I'm sure you didn't mean to sell me that bridge, but I really realized that I don't own the bridge. The city told me I can't set up a toll booth on the bridge. So let's talk about that. Maybe you can give me my money back. We can work it out. Rather than say, hey, right?
Would you say the difference is just intent? You just feel it.
Intent is really important. Intent is really important. But again, like Hinduism, it also has to do with the actions. So intent and actions are joined together. Okay? So very important, intent. So intent is very important, I'm just going, oh man, it's an effing beautiful day today, man, I'm so happy. Right? And that's perfectly okay. If I say, oh, it's such a beautiful day, I just feel like going out and stabbing people.
Oh my God.
I want to front stab them, That's really fun, right? Yeah, maybe not so good, right? Not so good, right? So again, intent, very important with these things. Thought, but speech is the thing that oftentimes we were very unconscious about our intent. Okay, so we have to be a little more conscious. We have to have conscious intent. We have to check again, that goes back to right understanding and right thought. Check our intent. Okay, check our intent. What is our intent here? Is it just really, I'm going to sell, I'm going to get the money, I'm going to rip you off. You guys, you're just a bunch of rubes for me. I'm just going to get money out of you. If that's your intent as a salesman, not so good, right? If your intent as a salesman is, I'm going to make a decent living, I'm going to make a fair profit, and I'm going to give my customers a really good product. They're going to be happy. I'm going to be happy. We're all going to do well. Tide floats all boats. That's more of a Buddhist principle. The right speech, very important. We get in a lot of trouble with language. When I give this lecture on Buddhism, I talk to you about stuff in this class, I feel great responsibility because I am an imperfect being. My knowledge of the stuff I'm teaching you here is imperfect. I am not the world's expert on this stuff. This is why I try to give you caveats. and tell you I'm not the world's expert on everything, right? I'm trying to give you as accurate information as I can muster with my imperfect caveman-like brain. I don't want to lead you astray, okay? This is why in this class I welcome questions. I welcome people to say, hey, you know, you don't really know what you're talking about. You spelled yolk wrong on the slide. You know. That's awesome, because I am imperfect, and I want to be as honest and direct with you guys as possible, especially talking about things that are really important. I think this stuff is important. So I want to be as direct and responsible as possible. And so I don't want to put myself out as the world's greatest authority on this stuff. You know, and I want to tell you, other people have different ideas about these things. I'm being honest with you, okay? Hopefully that doesn't confuse you, but this is one of the reasons why, because right speech is really important. Especially I'm going to lecture on Buddhism. I really want to, you know, keep my act together here. All right. Fourth one, this one should be obvious, right action. So this is, you know, like your 10 Commandments, Christianity boiled down into 5. For Buddhism, they boil it down to 5. Don't kill. Don't steal. In other words, be honest. Have appropriate sexual relations. Don't kill, don't steal, appropriate sex. Don't become intoxicated. Don't drink. Do other intoxicants. And what's the last one? What's? No, that's speech. Don't steal. Be honest. No, that's right. Yeah, don't say bad. Yes, don't lie. Don't say bad things. Again, these are behaviors. So right action are behaviors. Okay. So right actions are behaviors. Yes.
You can't drink, or it doesn't mean
So
like
again,
don't get drunk.
Buddhists.
I'm just curious.
Buddhists really
I like wine.
Buddhists interpret this very differently. Now, in Buddhism, there is no central church of all Buddhists that tell you what to do. It's your responsibility to figure out for yourself what this means, right? So I have a friend who's a Tibetan Buddhist, very good practitioner, much better than me. He keeps a wine cellar. He likes really good wine. And so what he'll do is he'll have dinner and he'll drink a glass or two of really good wine. And for him, that prohibition does not apply. For him, the prohibition is you don't drink wine or smoke pot or whatever and get intoxicated. Because what happens when you get intoxicated, your mind gets confused and you're more likely to start doing bad things.
Yeah.
One of the reasons people get in the fights at the bar and they start talking and then they start fighting is because they've been drinking. And their inhibitions are lowered and they fly off the handle more easily. So this is why. Your mind is cloudy, you're more likely to do things that lead to bad karma. But if you're enjoying a glass of wine, there's nothing wrong with that. So there's nobody to tell you. I mean, some churches, Buddhist groups develop their own rules, but there's no central authority. You decide. Okay? And if you decide that drinking wine is the way you want to be Buddhist, you find other Buddhists who drinking wine's okay. Now, if you become a monk or a nun, then there's going to be some rules. Okay? It's a different thing. You can talk about that. It's very interesting. Okay? But as lay people, these are the main things. And when you become a Buddhist, if you become a Buddhist, these are the lay things. There's 5 lay, for a lay Buddhist, there's 5 rules. These are the ones you follow. If you become a monk, there's like 200 plus things you've got to do. More serious. And the idea is if you're a monk or a nun, probably your karma's been screwed up enough that you need to really correct it. You need a much stronger correction. And so you take on more vows about things you want to do. You become celibate, you do all sorts of things, right? You don't mow the lawn because you might kill bugs in the lawn. It's okay if you mow the lawn and accidentally kill bugs. You don't have intent to kill those bugs. As a lay person, that's okay, right? But as a monk or nun, no. You won't see a monk out there with a power mower, right? Because they can kill bugs, and they really need to correct their karmas. And they need to not do that. Okay? For you guys, it's 5. For us lay people, it's 5. These 5 things. And this is right speech, right action. These are the beginning of ethical conduct. So right action. So again, these are obvious, right? These are obvious. Don't make trouble. Yes.
Is this where the idea of like moderation comes from, whereas as long as you have like an honest grip on something, you can kind of do what you want?
Yeah, there's moderation. Yeah, I mean, but moderation. But you don't want to moderately go around and kill things. So I'm a butcher, and so I could say, well, I kill these animals for my living, but I'm just going to do it moderately. Well, no, that's fine.
Right, but then when someone's attacking someone you love, or they're attacking you, then like you have to turn or something.
Well, this is a very good question, right? So that in these Asian countries we're talking about, they've developed martial arts systems. The Shaolin system developed in China. Shaolin monks were Buddhists, okay? And what did they do? Initially, the Shaolin monks were not allowed to carry bladed weapons. They carried staffs, sticks. And so they would protect themselves, they had to protect themselves a lot, but they'd protect other people, they would hit people with sticks because they're much less likely to kill somebody with a stick. All right, so they had sticks. Now later on, unfortunately, they became mercenaries and they carried swords and they chopped people up, hopefully for righteous things, debate that. Martial arts systems like Aikido developed. Right? Aikido was developed by a guy who was a very spiritual guy, very influenced probably by Buddhism. And he developed a martial art that was essentially non-violent, where you subdue somebody who's doing bad things, who's going to cause themselves bad karma. You can subdue them without permanently damaging them. Right? So Aikido developed this way in this philosophy. So you see this in some martial arts. Right? So people have had different takes on this. How do you do this? Right? How do you develop yourself? Now again, if you're a Buddha, and you're enlightened, you have pure perception, and people are attacking you, then you have a way of, even if you have to kill them, like killing Hitler, that you're doing this to help other people, even helping the person who's doing the violent behavior. But for us, imperfect beings, we try not to do these things. We try to avoid violence. Sex is a really interesting one. Sexual feelings engender strong emotions in people. And anytime something engenders strong emotions, there's a potential for that to really cause trouble. Okay? And many of us have experienced being in relationships, romantic relationships, where the intense feelings in the relationship really got us in trouble or helped us to do bad things. Helped us to do things that were not maybe the nicest things. Okay? And so what the Buddhists say about sexual stuff is not say you have to be straight or you have to be, do this or you have to only have sex in marriage. Because Buddhism exists in many different cultures, and a lot of the sexual mores have to do with the culture then. So what the Buddhists say in general is be responsible. Again, be honest with somebody. Look, hey, I really am attracted to you, I want to have sex with you, but I'm not really interested in a relationship. Let's just put that up front. I just want friends with benefits, or I really want to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. I really want to have a relationship. I'm looking for somebody to get married to and start a family. Whatever, be honest. Okay, be direct and be honest with people. Don't say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to go there and, mac on this girl. I'm going to tell her whatever she wants to hear, so she'll come tonight and sleep with me, and then tomorrow morning, before she wakes up, I'm out of here, right? That's from a Buddhist point of view, that's very bad. Okay, you're just manipulating another human being. You're using them for your own advantage. You're not taking their feelings into account. This is the golden rule, folks. Treat somebody else how you would like to be treated. Same as in Christianity, right? And especially around things that engender strong emotional responses like sexual relationships. Treat people honestly, forthright, okay? And do it responsibly, be responsible. And again, it's just like drinking wine, right? Have a glass of wine, but do it responsibly. You can drink wine without getting drunk, right? Mm-hmm. Smoking pot, they might, But again, you have to figure that out yourself. There's nobody telling you what the way to do is. The thing about the sexual thing is really interesting because, again, depending on the culture that you're in, because Buddhism is situated in culture. All these religions that we're talking about, even Western religions, all religions are situated in cultures, right? So you might be a Buddhist, you might have a Buddhist culture, it might be situated in a culture where that culture might be really anti-gay, and so when they talk about this prohibition in Buddhism, they're going to say, well, this has to do with being gay, and so no being gay, right? That's a cultural prohibition. That's not a Buddhist prohibition. Okay? And so you have to again be able to tease these out, and the same thing true for drinking. Same thing for things like eating meat or not. A lot of these things come out of the culture. Okay, and we'll talk about a little bit more about this. But these are really important ones. So that's right action. Next one is right livelihood. Don't make a profit through harming others. Okay, so typically Buddhists, if you're a Buddhist, you would not be an arms dealer, a crystal meth dealer, a shrimp fisherman, or a chemical company executive that makes napalm. Right? So this is sort of typical. You are going to try to have a profession where your profession contributes to the good of the world, doesn't make profit through harming others. Okay? This is very tricky and it's pretty much a gray area. Let's take the chemical executive, for example. Say I work for Dow Chemical Company, I make napalm, that's a bad thing, it causes harm to people. But on the other hand, I work for Dow Chemical Company and I make a chemical that fertilizes plants and I'm able to help people get food, and my chemical helps feed millions of people. Again, there's not a central authority that's going to tell you, how you do it. You have to figure that out. So your responsibility as a Buddhist. Some things pretty clear. Crystal meth dealer, there really ain't much good in that, right? So you pretty much say, you know, if you're gonna be a Buddhist, don't be a meth dealer, you're not helping anybody, okay? Try to make a right livelihood. The big thing comes here when you're in a Buddhist country where they eat meat. So like Tibetan Buddhists, you know, are, you know, they really shouldn't be killing animals, that's prohibited. But they eat meat because there's not much vegetables that grow in Tibet. So what they would typically do is in the village, there'd be a Muslim guy down at the end of the block, and he would be the butcher. Right? People say, oh, that's really hypocritical, you know, because he's, you know, he's the guy who's taking on the bad karma so you can eat meat, you know, that's bad, right? Well, you can look at it that way, or you can look at it in the way it's like, that's that guy's karma to be a Muslim, he's following his path is perfectly legitimate, I'll let him do his thing, and, you know, he's providing me with the meat, I don't really, if I could, and my druthers, maybe I wouldn't eat meat, but I live in a place where it's 20 degrees below zero in the summer, and it's 15,000 feet, so I think, you know, I'm probably gonna have to eat some meat. And do the best you can. The Dalai Lama, who is the head of Tibetan Buddhists, tried to become a vegetarian when he was younger, and he got sick. And his doctor went to him and said, no, he said, you know, you gotta eat meat, you know, because a lot of Tibetans, their bodies are adapted to living at high altitudes. I said, you gotta eat meat, it's not healthy for you. So he said, okay, well, what can I do? I can't become a vegetarian, but what I can do is I can eat meat not every day. I'll eat meat every other day. So that's what he does, he eats meat every other day, right? So, yeah, he does what he can do. So the idea here is you do what you can do. And what can you do, you know? So maybe your family's business is to be you know, people who exterminate, get rid of pests and bugs and stuff out of the house. So maybe that's your job, your family business, and you sort of have to go into that business. Well, okay, so, you know, you're still killing bugs, it's not the greatest thing, but you try to do what you can do. So maybe what you do is you use ecologically sound pesticides, for one thing, so you don't at least pollute the environment. And maybe for rats and mice, maybe you catch them in a live trap and take them out and release them in the woods somewhere. You do what you can do, okay? You do what you can do. Okay? Now, those are the ethic ones. Those three are the ethics. And the last three are the mental disciplines, and these relate to meditation, okay? And they are, and again, you know, this is the order they're in here, but you can also put these in a different order. It doesn't really matter. The first of these is right effort, and this is this is like advanced. So the other one was like cognitive behavioral counseling. This is like cognitive behavioral psychotherapy, and this is where you're persistent in preventing evil and unharmonious states of mind from coming to be. You need to reflect on your own states of mind, and then promote good harmonious states, and try to use those to replace disharmonious states. Okay, so this is sort of like advanced cognitive behavioral therapy. Or you could say this is like psychoanalysis, that you have all these unconscious, unharmonious states, and you need to become aware of those things so they don't influence your behavior, right? So you can think of right effort as a little like psychotherapy, like real psychotherapy, deep psychotherapy. Number 7 is right mindfulness or attentiveness, and this is being aware of what your body's doing, what you sense and feel, what your mind is thinking about, and you be able to become detached somewhat from these things. Just sit and notice what's going on in your mind. Okay? And this is typically what you see when you do mindfulness meditation now, which has become very popular. Again, mindfulness meditation comes out of the Buddhist tradition. Okay? It doesn't just exist, some guy didn't just make this up. They actually took it from the Buddhist position. We could have a discussion about whether removing it from this Buddhist context, you know, is valuable or not. I don't know. I think there's pros and cons about that. But this is where it comes from. Okay, that you just basically just observe your own mind functioning, and by doing this, your mind will start to calm down. Right? And this is a mental discipline. It's easy to say, it's hard to do. The last one is right concentration, and this is. Again, also part of what we call now mindfulness meditation is that once you notice your mind, it will start to calm down. And once it calms down, then you can concentrate on something. Usually you start by doing your breath. That's the typical way of doing it. But you can also concentrate on this feelings or this perception of, or you can concentrate on just trying to get that sense of the pure perception, of concentrating on nothing, or just everything, right? So this is also a part of the meditation practice. So these ones are the meditation practices. And they usually, all these things go together. And you see these things not only in sitting meditation, but you see these in other things that are related to stuff you find in Buddhist cultures. For instance, martial arts. right? So next fall, we'll be teaching the class on Asian warrior cultures, and we'll talk to you about different Asian martial arts. I'll repeat some of the stuff in this class that I've talked about, and I'll talk about it in the context of the martial arts, because these things influence the martial arts. They influence things like Chinese medicine that we're going to learn about this semester. Okay, these things have influence that, you know, these practices can influence a lot of these things that come out of the culture. But I will say that in Buddhism, meditation, these three things, or a combination of these things, or even just one of them, depending on what kind of Buddhism you're doing, these are really part and parcel of Buddhism. Meditation and meditation practice is an important part of Buddhism, even if that practice is just trying to be aware of yourself. But meditation practice and formal meditation practice is part of being a Buddhist. That most Buddhists will indulge in some sort of meditation exercises related to 6, 7, and 8 here. Okay? And many of those exercises are a combination of these things. All right? It's a very common Buddhist practice that you meditate. And meditation is really central to being a Buddhist, most types of Buddhism. There are some exceptions to this. I'll talk to you about some of the exceptions a little bit later on in the semester, but most types of Buddhism, meditation is really important. There are lots of different meditation techniques for these things. We're going to talk about those as well. We're going to go from the basic ones, like in Zen meditation, very simple, very stripped down, to the very complicated ones that we find in Tibetan Buddhism. But underlying all those meditation techniques are these principles, these ideas. Okay. Now, the Eightfold Path, you can group these into 3 groups: right view, right intention, or wisdom; right speech, right action, right livelihood, or ethical conduct; right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, are mental development. And this is symbolized in this symbol here. This is the wheel. Okay, and this wheel has 8 spokes, and the 8 spokes represent each of these things. Okay, so when you see this in Buddhism, when you see a depiction of this wheel in Buddhism, this is what it means. This is to remind you of the Eightfold Path. And this is how you work toward enlightenment. You follow this path, you do this, and originally you do this gradually, and then over time, maybe even over many lifetimes, you will be able to achieve enlightenment. Okay, see this eightfold thing or this thing? I talked about the stages of the 12 dependent arising. And again, I'll re-emphasize that that is the core that underlies all these things. It underlies the Four Noble Truths, underlies the Eightfold Path. It is the core of Buddhism. And again, one of the Buddha's followers was told, Ananda was one of the Buddha's first followers who becomes enlightened after the Buddha. The Buddha says to him, "He who sees dependent arising sees the Dharma." The Dharma is the rules, the code of conduct, all these kind of things, the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths. So this all come out of that dependent arising, that idea that we live in a world, a reality of cause and effect, made up of cause and effect. Okay, so I have a little more to do in this lecture. Talk a little bit about the life of the Buddha, and then we're going to talk about, the next time we'll talk about different types of Buddhism and places that they're at. And then we're going to go from that, and we're going to start talking probably first about Tibetan Buddhism. We'll learn a little bit about Tibetan Buddhism. And so that's what we'll do. So again, I will end there for today. Remember, we are not having class next week.